There are two photographs of Montgomery Clift that, placed side by side, tell a story most people think they understand. The first is from 1950. He is in his late 20s, and the face is almost unreasonably beautiful. Dark eyes, a sculpted jaw, a gaze that is both open and withholding at the same time. This was the face that made every woman in America fall in love. This was the face that launched a new kind of movie star. The second is from 1958. Same eyes, everything else rearranged. The left side frozen, the jaw rebuilt, the symmetry gone. Most people say the crash destroyed him, that the first photograph is the real Montgomery Clift and the second is what remained. But that is not what happened. The man in the first photograph was already in agony, already drinking, already hiding a truth about himself that, in 1950s America, could have ended everything faster than any telephone pole. The crash did not destroy Montgomery Clift. It destroyed the mask, and what was underneath had been breaking for a very long time. His name was Edward Montgomery Clift, and the story of what happened to him is not about a car crash. It is about a man who was never allowed to be the person he actually was. Edward Montgomery Clift was born on October 17, 1920, in Omaha, Nebraska. He had a twin sister, Roberta, and an older brother, Brooks. His father, William, was a vice president at the Omaha National Trust Company. His mother, Ethel, went by Sonny. And Sonny is where this story really begins. Sonny Clift was adopted. She had been told as a young woman that her biological parents were Southern aristocrats, descendants of a postmaster general under Abraham Lincoln, a Supreme Court justice. Whether or not any of it was true, she believed it with the force of someone whose entire identity depended on it. She spent her adult life trying to prove this lineage, and she raised her children as evidence. They were not brought up, they were curated. Private tutors instead of schools, European hotels instead of playgrounds, French lessons, etiquette training, impeccable manners, performed for audiences of relatives and strangers who might validate the bloodline Sonny needed to be real. Monty did not attend a regular school until his teens. He fell badly behind academically. But none of that mattered to Sonny, because academic achievement was never the point. Presentation was the point. Her children were ornaments, and Monty, with his dark eyes and natural grace, was the most beautiful ornament she had. It is worth understanding this clearly, because it shaped everything that followed. Montgomery Clift did not grow up learning how to be a person. He grew up learning how to be a performance. The distance between who he was and who he was expected to appear to be was established in childhood, by a mother who saw her son the same way the world would later see him, as a surface, as a face, as something to display. But Monty found something of his own. At 12, he discovered acting, and he loved it in a way that had nothing to do with his mother's ambitions. She had pushed him toward modeling. Acting was his. It gave him the only permission he would ever find to feel things honestly, as long as he was pretending to be someone else. He made his Broadway debut at 13 in Fly Away Home. Over the next decade, he became one of the most respected young actors in New York theatre, sharing stages with Alfred Lunt, Lynn Fontanne, and Tallulah Bankhead. The reviews were extraordinary. He was not famous yet, but the people who understood acting understood that something remarkable was forming. There was something else forming too, something quieter, something that in the world Monty was about to enter would be far more dangerous than talent. By his early teens, he knew he was attracted to men. His mother, remarkably, knew as well. In a taped phone call recorded years later, Sonny said with casual certainty, "Monty was a homosexual very early. I think it was about 12 or 13. She did not condemn him for it, but acceptance inside a living room in Omaha is not the same thing as safety in the world. and the world Montgomery Clift was preparing to walk into, Hollywood in the late 1940s, was the most dangerous possible place to carry that particular truth. There was a relationship during these New York years that most people have never heard about, one that would connect Montgomery Clift to one of the most famous works of art in American history. But that comes later. In 1946, Monty did something that every studio in Hollywood wanted, and that almost no young actor had ever had the nerve to attempt. He went to the movies, on his own terms. Montgomery Clift's arrival in Hollywood was, by the standards of the time, an act of rebellion. Every major studio wanted him under contract. He refused them all. He waited until his first 2 films were successes, then negotiated a 3-picture deal with Paramount that gave him the right to choose his own scripts, his own directors, and to walk away whenever he wanted. No young actor had ever commanded that kind of leverage. One industry observer called it the death knell of the producers and the moguls, and the birth of actor power. Red River came out in 1948. He played a cowboy opposite John Wayne, and the contrast between them was electric. Wayne was hard, loud, commanding. Clift was quiet, internal, watchful. He moved through scenes with a stillness that made audiences lean forward. He was doing something no leading man had done before, using silence and vulnerability as tools of power. The Search, released the same year, earned him his first Academy Award nomination. He was on the cover of Life magazine by December. He was 28 years old. And then came A Place in the Sun in 1951, with Elizabeth Taylor. The 2 of them on screen together generated something critics struggled to describe. Their romantic scenes were praised for a naturalness and emotional authenticity that felt, to audiences, like watching something private. Taylor, who was 19 at the time, fell unmistakably in love with him. Monty loved her back, deeply, but not in the way she initially hoped. What formed between them instead was something rarer than romance. It was a loyalty so total that it would outlast careers, marriages, scandals, and death itself. She saw him, the real him, and she never once turned away from what she saw. But while the public watched the brooding heartthrob, Clift was living a private life that was consuming him from the inside. He had been involved in a deeply intimate affair with the choreographer Jerome Robbins, a relationship few people knew about. The connection between them was intense and emotionally charged. According to actor Russ Tamblyn, it was Clift who gave Robbins an idea at a party on Fire Island that would eventually become one of the most celebrated works in American theatre. A musical about Romeo and Juliet, but set among street gangs in New York. West Side Story. When Clift left Robbins to pursue his film career in Hollywood, Robbins told him, "I could make you love me." He could not. In 1949, Clift was arrested on 42nd Street in New York for soliciting. Paramount stepped in immediately. The charge vanished. No record. No publicity. The system that protected him also owned him. His safety depended entirely on his willingness to keep performing the role of a man he was not. The drinking was already a problem before the crash, before the pain, before any of it. The alcohol was not caused by a car accident that had not yet happened. It was caused by the distance between who Montgomery Clift was and who he had to pretend to be every single day, in every interview, at every premiere, in every room he entered. His beauty was the thing that made him famous, and the thing that made his life unbearable. Because the more the world loved his face, the more invisible the person behind it became. They wanted the photograph. They never asked what the photograph was hiding. And then came the night of May 12th, 1956, and the photograph shattered. May 12th, 1956. Clift is in the middle of filming Raintree County with Elizabeth Taylor. That evening, he attends a dinner party at Taylor's Beverly Hills home. Kevin McCarthy is there. Rock Hudson is there, another gay man hiding behind a studio-constructed marriage, smiling the smile the industry required. It is a room full of people performing versions of themselves. Monty leaves the party. He is driving down one of the twisting roads above Beverly Hills. His car veers off a hairpin turn, crosses the road, and slams head-on into a telephone pole. A 4,800-volt transformer, knocked loose by the impact, narrowly misses the wreck. Kevin McCarthy, driving ahead, sees the collision in his rearview mirror. He turns back. He believes his friend is dead. McCarthy races to Taylor's house. Taylor, Hudson, and Taylor's husband Michael Wilding drive to the scene. The car is an accordion of crushed metal. The doors are so badly jammed that no one can reach him from the outside. Taylor crawls through the back seat, reaches Clift in the front, and finds the most famous face in Hollywood destroyed. His jaw is broken, his nose is broken, his cheekbones are fractured, his sinuses are shattered. 2 front teeth have been knocked loose and are lodged in his throat, blocking his airway. He is choking on his own face. Taylor reaches into his mouth with her bare fingers and pulls the teeth out. She holds his head in her lap until the ambulance arrives. She is 24 years old. When photographers arrived minutes later, tipped off by the police radio, Rock Hudson, Kevin McCarthy, and Michael Wilding formed a wall around the wreck. They stood between the cameras and the broken man on the ground. They understood, all of them, what a photograph of that face in that condition would mean. And they understood something else too. Something nobody said out loud. The wrong photographer, asking the wrong questions, noticing the wrong details about Monty's private life, could finish him more completely than any telephone pole. The ambulance left. The road went quiet. Taylor stood in the broken glass with blood on her hands and on her dress. The silence after something like that is its own kind of sound. The doctors rebuilt his face over the following weeks. They reset the jaw. They repaired what they could. They could not restore the nerve on the left side, which meant that half of his face would never move the same way again. The symmetry that had defined him, that had made him the most beautiful man in Hollywood, was gone. He returned to the set of Raintree County 2 months later. But here is the thing that matters more than the surgery or the scars. The crash did not break Montgomery Clift. It broke the surface. And the surface had been the only thing standing between him and a world that was not prepared for what was underneath. He came back. That needs to be said first, because the story people tell about Montgomery Clift after the crash tends to skip straight to the ruin. He came back, and he kept working. And some of what he did in the years that followed was among the finest acting anyone in Hollywood had ever seen. But the wreckage was visible now, in ways it hadn't been before. The director of Raintree County, Edward Dmytryk, tried to film him from angles that would soften the damage. It didn't work. Audiences came to the theatre specifically to see the before and after, a voyeurism that Clift predicted with bitter accuracy. Dmytryk later wrote that he went looking for his absent star one afternoon and found, inside Clift's trailer, more than 100 containers of prescription drugs and a case full of needles and syringes. During filming in Danville, Kentucky, Clift was found running naked through the town. A policeman was stationed outside his hotel room every night to make sure he stayed put. The pain was real, The injuries had left him in chronic physical agony, and the painkillers he used to manage it fused with the alcohol that had been there long before the crash into something that was consuming him from the inside out. But the talent was real too. And that is the part that tends to disappear beneath the wreckage. In 1958, he appeared in The Young Lions, his only film alongside Marlon Brando. In 1959, Elizabeth Taylor once again used her considerable power to get him cast in Suddenly last summer, putting her own salary on the line as insurance because no studio would cover him. In 1961, he starred in The Misfits with Marilyn Monroe and Clark Gable, a film haunted by the visible deterioration of all three of its leads. Monroe, who was deep in her own unraveling, looked at Clift during filming and said something that has stayed in the record ever since. "He's the only person I know who is in even worse shape than I am." Both of them would be dead within 5 years. That same year, Clift took a small role in Stanley Kramer's Judgment at Nuremberg. 15 minutes on screen, playing a mentally disabled man who had been sterilized by the Nazis. The performance earned him his 4th Academy Award nomination. Critics and audiences assumed the anguish they were watching was real, that Clift was too broken to remember his lines, that the confusion on his face was his own. They were wrong. His nephew's 2018 documentary revealed pages of Clift's original script, densely annotated in his own handwriting. He had rewritten the dialogue deliberately. He was not falling apart on camera, he was acting. But by then, the story about Montgomery Clift had calcified. He was damaged goods. Nobody wanted to believe the instrument still worked. And then came John Huston, and the blow that actually ended his career. Not the crash, not the drinking. A lawsuit. Huston had cast Clift as Freud in 1962. They had worked well together on The Misfits. But during pre-production at Huston's castle in Ireland, Huston discovered that Clift had had sex with a man on the property. Huston's biographer confirmed what happened next. The director's homophobia surfaced, and the relationship between them collapsed. When the film went over budget, largely because of Huston's own constant script changes and extravagant spending, Universal Studios sued Clift, placing the blame entirely on him. Clift's brother Brooks said later, with a clarity that cut through decades of myth, "Probably what was the major reason that my brother died was that John Huston brought a very unfair lawsuit against him." Huston lost the suit. It did not matter. The accusation alone made Clift uninsurable. Studios would not touch him. He went 4 years without making a single film. For a man who had once said that not working was the most depressing thing he could imagine, those 4 years were a sentence. Elizabeth Taylor, one more time. In 1966, she put her salary on the line again to get Clift cast opposite her in Reflections in a Golden Eye. She had done this before. She would do it as many times as it took. She was the one person in the industry who never stopped fighting for him, never stopped seeing the actor and the man behind the damage that everyone else had decided was the whole story. He was supposed to start filming in August 1966. He never made it. July 22, 1966. A hot summer day in New York City. Montgomery Clift spent most of it inside his townhouse at 217 East 61st Street. His companion and private nurse, Lorenzo James, said he barely spoke all day. He stayed in his bedroom. He read. The city moved around him, and he did not move with it. That night, sometime between midnight and 1 in the morning, James stood outside Clift's closed bedroom door and asked whether he wanted to watch a rebroadcast of The Misfits which was airing on television. The film in which he had appeared alongside Marilyn Monroe and Clark Gable, both now dead. The film in which Monroe had said he was in worse shape than she was. From behind the door, Clift answered. 2 words. Absolutely not. They were the last words anyone would hear him speak. James went to bed. At 6:30 the following morning, he went to check on Clift and found the bedroom door locked. Unable to break it down, he ran to the garden, climbed a ladder to the 2nd floor, and came in through the window. He found Clift lying on the bed, unclothed, his reading glasses still on. He was dead. The autopsy listed occlusive coronary artery disease. He was 45 years old. His funeral was held at St. James's Church in New York City. He was buried in a small Quaker cemetery in Brooklyn. There was no Hollywood spectacle, no industry tribute, just a grave and a name, and the people who had actually known him, standing in a place that was nothing like the world he had spent his adult life navigating. His mother, Sunny, the woman who had manufactured Montgomery Clift from childhood, who had dressed him in fine clothes and paraded him through European hotels and treated him as proof of a bloodline she needed the world to believe in, outlived him by 22 years. She died in 1988, 3 months short of her 100th birthday. She outlived both of her sons. Elizabeth Taylor did not disappear from his story after his death. She never stopped talking about Monty, with a protectiveness that went beyond friendship into something closer to guardianship of his memory. In the decades that followed, she became one of the most prominent advocates for gay rights and HIV/AIDS research in the world, driven in part by what she had witnessed through Monty, the cost of forcing people to hide the most fundamental truth about themselves. She had saved his life once, on a dark road in Beverly Hills, reaching into his broken mouth with her bare hands. She could not save him from everything else. But she spent the rest of her life making sure the world that had destroyed him would have to answer for it. Montgomery Clift has been dead for almost 60 years. The story the world tells about him has hardened into a shape that is easy to repeat, and almost entirely wrong. The story goes like this. The most beautiful man in Hollywood had a car crash, lost his face, became an addict, and died. The longest suicide in Hollywood history. It is a story about a fall, from beauty to ruin, from grace to destruction. And it is, in almost every way that matters, a lie. The crash did not create Montgomery Clift's pain. It revealed it. He was drinking heavily before May 12, 1956. He was hiding a fundamental truth about himself before the telephone pole, before the broken jaw, before Elizabeth Taylor pulled teeth from his throat on a dark road in Beverly Hills. The crash broke his face, but the face had always been the least honest thing about him. What Montgomery Clift actually was, beneath the surface the world could not stop staring at, was a revolutionary. He was the first actor to break the studio contract system, refusing to sign away his autonomy at a time when every other actor in Hollywood accepted those terms without question. The model of independence he created, the right to choose your own scripts, your own directors, your own career, became the template that every actor who followed him inherited. Brando, Dean, Nicholson, De Niro. They all walked through a door that Montgomery Clift kicked open at 28 years old. He was one of the inventors of a new kind of screen acting, a method of emotional honesty so precise that even when his body was failing and his face was frozen and the industry had written him off as uninsurable, the truth still came through. He gave Judgment at Nuremberg a 15-minute performance that earned an Oscar nomination. And he did it deliberately, consciously, from a script he had rewritten in his own hand, while the world assumed he was too broken to remember his lines. The talent never left him. The world simply stopped being willing to see it. His tragedy was not that he lost his beautiful face. It was that the beautiful face was the only thing most people ever saw. Behind it was a man who was funny. His friends said he was closer to Jerry Lewis off-screen than to the brooding figure the public knew. A man who kissed the people he loved in public because he did not see why he shouldn't. A man who owned one suit and drove a car that was 10 years old and could not have cared less about the things Hollywood wanted him to care about. A man who told a close friend, with the kind of honesty that defined his best work, "I love men in bed, but I really love women." Not tortured by who he was. Tortured by a world that made who he was a crime. He was manufactured by a mother who treated him as an accessory to her own unproven legacy. He was marketed by an industry that wanted his face, but not his truth. He was arrested for being himself, and had the charge erased by a studio that needed him to keep performing. He was sued by a director who turned against him after discovering he was gay. He was denied work for 4 years, not because his talent had diminished, but because the industry decided that a man it could no longer control was a man it could no longer use. The longest suicide in Hollywood history. That is what they called it. But suicide implies a choice, and most of what destroyed Montgomery Clift was not chosen. It was imposed. By a mother, by an industry, by a culture, by an era that could not tolerate the distance between who he was and who they needed him to be. The crash did not destroy him. The mask did. He is buried in a Quaker cemetery in Brooklyn. There is no star on Hollywood Boulevard with his name. There is just a headstone and 2 dates and the quiet of a place where nobody is performing anything for anyone. And perhaps that, more than anything, is what Montgomery Clift spent his entire life looking for. If you found this story worth hearing, please like and subscribe so you never miss another one.